There was a specific moment, a single afternoon in a rehearsal room on the final day of a secret week-long experiment where Rush's entire comeback hung in the balance. Geddy Lee and Lifeson weren't sure if this was going to work. They'd brought in a German drummer named Anika Nilles, mostly unknown outside serious drumming circles, to see if there was any version of Rush that could exist without Neil Peart behind the kit. They went into it with open minds. They also went into it with real, honest doubt. And then came the final day, and something happened that neither of them expected. According to Lifeson, Nilles didn't just play the songs well that day. She had spent the entire week absorbing every single piece of complex technical, structural feedback they'd given her. And on that last day, she synthesized all of it at once, song after song, note after note. She just killed it, in Lifeson's own words. And in that room, looking at each other, two men who had spent over a decade insisting Rush could not continue without their fallen bandmate, looked at each other and made a joke that wasn't really a joke at all. "Yep, we have a real problem," one of them said, "because now we have a drummer, and we're gonna have to make a commitment to a tour." This is the story of that rehearsal, the moment Rush decided to come back, and the song that, by pure coincidence, became the ultimate proof that they'd found exactly the right person. To understand why this rehearsal moment carried so much weight, you have to understand what Rush had been saying, publicly, for years. Neil Peart passed away in January 2020. He had already stepped away from touring back in 2015, following the band's career-spanning R40 tour, its final date, fittingly at the very same Kia Forum in Los Angeles where this new chapter would eventually begin. Peart had been struggling through that tour, dealing with physical ailments that made it harder and harder for him to play at the level he demanded of himself. He was, by every account, a perfectionist who refused to go on stage and deliver anything less than what his fans expected, so he walked away on his own terms. When he died 5 years later, Geddy Lee and Lifeson made it clear, repeatedly, that touring as Rush again was not something they could imagine. Not because they didn't want to keep playing music together, they did, and they continued writing, just for the simple joy of it, with no real plan to ever perform those songs live. But touring as Rush, performing the catalog that Neil Peart had built with them note by impossible note, felt like something that belonged to a chapter that had already closed. For years, that's where things stood. A legendary band, frozen in place, defined as much by what they refused to do as by what they had already accomplished. And then, slowly, something started to shift. The path that led to Anika Nilles wasn't some carefully engineered industry search. It started almost by accident. Nilles had spent 2022 touring Europe with guitar legend Jeff Beck, playing more than 60 shows with one of the most demanding, detail-obsessed musicians in rock history. Watching from the side of that stage, night after night, was Geddy Lee's own longtime bass technician, a man who couldn't stop talking about what he was seeing once he got home from the tour. Lee looked her up, found her YouTube channel, hundreds of thousands of subscribers deep in a world most casual rock fans never see, full of technically jaw-dropping performances that had already made her a legend among serious drummers. He mentioned her almost as an aside in a 2023 interview, calling her playing terrific. But an offhand compliment is a long way from inviting someone to fill the most scrutinized seat in progressive rock history. What actually had to happen next was much harder, much riskier, and much more uncertain than anyone watching from the outside ever realized. They had to find out if it would actually work. So Rush quietly brought Anika Nilles to the band, not for an audition. Lee was specific about that distinction afterward. At that point, the band genuinely didn't know if they were going to tour at all. This was an experiment, a test, a way to find out, privately, before anyone else in the world knew it was happening, whether there was any version of these songs that could come back to life with someone new behind the kit. What followed was a week of rehearsals that, by every account, were intense in a way that only musicians at this level can really understand. Neil Peart's drum parts are not simply difficult, they are structurally embedded into the architecture of these songs. Odd time signatures that shift mid-phrase, polyrhythms layered against Geddy Lee's bass lines and vocal melodies, fills so specific and so iconic that Rush fans can recite them the way other fans recite guitar solos. Learning to play those parts technically is one challenge. Learning to play them the way Rush actually experiences and feels them, responding to Lee's bass cues, locking into Lifeson's guitar phrasing, understanding the conversational, almost telepathic way three musicians who've played together for 50 years communicate without words, is an entirely different, much harder challenge. Throughout that week, Lifeson and Lee gave Nilles an enormous amount of highly specific, highly technical feedback. Subtle musical cues, small structural adjustments, the kind of granular notes that only make sense to people who have spent decades inside these exact songs, hearing nuances that nobody else would ever notice. And here is the thing that actually convinced them. Nilles didn't just nod and try her best. She absorbed every single note. She processed it. She integrated it. Day after day, the gap between very talented drummer playing Rush songs and the fourth essential piece of this band's sound kept closing. By the final day of that week, it had closed completely. On that last day, something happened that Lifeson would later describe with genuine, unguarded amazement. Nilles took everything, every piece of complex feedback, every subtle cue, every structural note they'd given her across the entire week, and synthesized it all at once, song after song. Lifeson's own word for what he watched her do that day was simple and direct. She just killed it. This wasn't a moment of relief, it was a moment of reckoning. Because up until that point, Lee and Lifeson had been able to tell themselves this was still just an experiment, a let's see, with no real obligation attached. But watching Nilles process and execute everything they'd thrown at her, completely, in real time, removed every excuse they had left. They looked at each other in that room, and one of them said something that was framed as a joke but carried the unmistakable weight of an actual decision. Yep, we have a real problem now. Because we have a drummer, and we're gonna have to make a commitment to a tour. It's a wonderful detail, if you sit with it for a second, that the moment Rush decided to come back from a decade of silence wasn't framed by either of them as triumphant. It was framed as a problem. Well, now we actually have to do this admission. The kind two old friends make when reality has just overtaken whatever excuse they'd been hiding behind. That's how you know it was real. If the final rehearsal day was the moment Rush knew Nilles could handle the job, the natural science moment was the moment they learned exactly who she was as a musician. Not just a technician, but someone who genuinely loved this material on the same level they did. As the band finalized preparations for the tour, pulling together a rotating catalog of more than 40 songs to draw from across different nights, they made a late, fairly significant change. They decided to add Natural Science, a sprawling, multi-part epic from 1980s permanent waves, built on shifting time signatures and structural complexity, even by Rush's own demanding standards. Adding it meant dropping two other songs from the prepared set entirely. A real curveball, thrown in late, with everything else already locked. For most musicians, that kind of last-minute addition, especially one this technically demanding, would trigger stress, maybe panic, at minimum, a request for more time. Nilles' reaction was the opposite. She lit up. By every account, she nearly lost her mind with excitement because Natural Science, unbeknownst to anyone, was secretly already her favorite Rush track. The band hadn't just handed their new drummer an enormous late challenge. They'd accidentally handed her the song she'd probably been hoping to play the entire time. It's a small story, but it tells you something important. This wasn't a hired gun grinding through an assignment. This was someone who had genuinely lived inside this catalog long before she ever got the call. And on opening night at the Kia Forum on June 7th, 2026, Natural Science made it into the actual set list, performed live in front of an arena that had absolutely no idea what they were about to witness. What Lee and Lifeson were ultimately looking for in this entire process wasn't a Neil Peart impersonator. They were explicit about that. They didn't want someone doing a careful, respectful imitation of his playing style, a kind of museum piece recreation of what Rush used to sound like. What they wanted and what they found was a drummer who could absorb everything that made these songs structurally and emotionally work, while still bringing something unmistakably her own to the room. Forceful, creative, fresh, a genuine fourth voice, not a ghost of a third. When Rush finally opened the 50-something tour at the Kia Forum, the results spoke for themselves. Across a sold-out 4-night run, reviewers and longtime fans alike described watching Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson play with the energy of musicians 20 years younger, hitting impossibly high vocal notes, delivering guitar solos with the fire of their 30s, while Nilles anchored the entire performance from behind the kit with a power and presence that made the whole impossible thing actually work. The night included a tribute collage to Neil Peart. It included Natural Science, played exactly the way Nilles had been dreaming of playing it. It included longtime fans, many of whom had been certain this night would never come, standing in an arena together watching something they thought had ended in January of 2020 quietly, carefully, respectfully come back to life. Here's what I think that rehearsal room story actually teaches us. Rush didn't come back because someone convinced Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson it was a good business decision. They came back because on one specific afternoon, in a private room nobody else got to see, a drummer they brought in almost as an experiment did something that made the decision make itself. Yep, we have a real problem now. Sometimes the best things that ever happened to us arrive looking exactly like a problem you can no longer talk yourself out of solving. If this story moved you, let me know what you think of Anika Nilles' performance so far, and whether Natural Science deserves a permanent spot in the set list. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.